Hey everybody, I am here with one of my favorite people, Dr. Martin Harvey. Thanks for taking some time to do this.
My absolute pleasure.
True to form, he is actually between shifts. So seeing patients in the morning, he's gonna go see some patients this afternoon because we're actually down the street from his practice here outside of Melbourne. So thanks again for breaking up your day to do this and kind of why we felt this was important to do in between his patients. There's just a really good opportunity, again, for chiropractors. And what I mean is, through the lockdowns and pandemic, wasn't a good idea to be doing outside talks, corporate talks. Most people weren't even going to a place of business, they were working remote. So for obvious reasons, and I'm gonna tell you a little bit of politeness, we didn't even teach this content of how to do talks and get out there and do corporate talks because it just wasn't appropriate for the times. However, like anything, if you're an early adopter, there's a lot of ground to be gained. And I think that time is right now where you can go back out, do corporate talks, do talks in small businesses, do not discount small businesses, or even inside your practice. So what I'd like to do is do a couple tips that I know will help you out with Martin, who I consider a communication expert, and just share with you some things you could use in your next line of communication, your next talk, again, internal or outside of the practice. It could be a sports club, could be a corporate environment. It kind of doesn't matter, but I want to give you some things I know you can use because if you do take action, you'll be ahead of the curve and again, be an early adopter. So with that big tee up, my man, and a mouthful of words, what do we have today? What are we going to talk about?
Well, I think there's a few things when people think about doing talks that are really important if you're going to do effective talks. And one of the biggest misunderstandings or mistakes that chiropractors make is that they think that the job of the talk is to give people information that will logically persuade them that they should do whatever you are saying out of your talk, which ideally should be come in to get at least a chiropractic assessment. And that's just not the way people make decisions. You can have all the logic in the world and people will not take action. Love it,
love it. And the idea right there is begin with the end in mind. Hey, at the end of your talk, let's just call it what it is. We'd like to check them out. Yep. I always say we're not going to talk people back to health. We're probably going to adjust them back to health, but let's first make sure you're a candidate for care, which requires a visit in the practice. Don't feel weird about that. Like, it's actually being a specific doctor. It's being a detail-oriented doctor when you say, I want to check you out first, rather than say, this is what everybody needs. How would you know you haven't even checked them out? So rule number one is begin with the end in mind.
Yeah.
Want to do that, but then also this idea of logic. Please talk me through that because I see so many docs making this mistake.
Yeah, and it's because we come into, we see the logic. There is logic for why people should have chiropractic care and they're clearly going to benefit from it. And it kind of makes sense that you go, well, if I just give them the logical reasons, they'll see that it makes sense. And there's all those ideas of, you just need to tell the story, and if people knew what we knew, they'd do what we do. But unfortunately, it's bullshit.
Those are some of my favorite poets. I love. They would do what we do, and it's wrong. They wouldn't.
No. What actually makes them do what we do is the other part of the brain. So Daniel Kahneman, who's recently passed but was a Nobel laureate for this research, essentially said we've got two systems of thinking, which he called System 1, System 2. I prefer Gator Brain and Judge Brain. So yes, we need logic. People do need logic, but that part of our brain is going to be trumped by our Gator Brain, our primitive brain, that is more about how things feel and whether we can see an emotional reason for taking action. So emotion will trump logic in getting people to make an appointment.
Please say that again, because that is the crux of the conversation here. Is you've got to touch them inside here, it's not here. There is a logic to what we do, but you've got to hit them here.
Yeah. Right. So essentially it's emotion will trump logic, and there's a few things that will. First of all, their emotional brain will be risk averse. So you've got to kind of get your credibility first. So before people will even listen to your message, you've got to position yourself as an authority. Mm-hmm. Now, the good thing about going out into your community and being the person at the front of the room is that automatically builds a degree of authority.
Yep.
A couple of other things that you need to build into a talk to create authority. One is you've got to use some data or statistics where the currency of authority is research. So you want to have a little bit of research in there, but don't expect that that's going to do the heavy lifting. All that's really going to do is establish you as an authority. Secondly, you've got to give some counterintuitive information. You've got to give some information that they don't know, because if you're doing talks and at the end of it, all you get is people going, thanks so much, that was a really good reminder, then their Gator Brain is not going to say there's anything novel here, there's nothing new here, there's nothing that I'm going to miss out on if I don't take action. Whereas giving counterintuitive information that people may not know, and one of the classic ones that you will do if you're doing a stress talk, you'll say stress is good.
That's right.
Which sounds counterintuitive, but then you can set a context around when stress is good, when stress is bad, what sort of warning signs people should be looking out for that it might be having a negative impact on them. And that's where they start to put themselves emotionally Gator Brain in the, hang on, this person's an authority, and I can see there's some novel information that this person has access to. Now's the time that I need to take action.
Love it. So I'm going to do what Martin Harvey effectively calls a double click. So I'm going to quote you in a video with you. Okay. The double click would be, absolutely you want to use statistics and numbers, but that does not mean put up the research article and read it to them. What you can do is get a couple different pieces of information and just put it in the bullet point. Just give them a really easy summary. There's this bit of information, there's this bit of information, and this. Or here's one statistic, here's a percentage, and here's what 1 in 3 people do. So there's a way to condense it. So you're establishing the numbers and the metrics, but you're not putting up a journal article like you might at a chiropractic seminar. That would be a big mistake. Don't do that. Number 2, what Martin was talking about is, as we go through the information, you want it to be counterintuitive. So saying things like stress is good, it's kind of like, I've never heard that before. I've always heard stress is bad. And then it just kind of becomes white noise and they tune you out. But this idea that stress is good, all of a sudden they kind of lean into the conversation and go, well, tell me a little bit more about that, you know? And then this idea of just creating some urgency with the loss aversion, I think that's huge, because once you've established that credibility, now it's time to get them to take action. And the way you're going to do that really is working them through that process, creating some emotional, need to do this right now, and eventually getting them into the practice.
Absolutely.
So the Gator Brain, I love it, because that's the risk aversion.
Yeah.
We've established the metrics and the data early, and then the other idea of really just kind of, building some rapport with people in a way that they're never going to hear this information anywhere else, but there's a real easy way to do that without reading journal articles to them.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. What else do we need to know on this?
Well, I guess the second thing, another perspective that I would have there is that people naturally want to kind of kick the can down the road. If something is important but not urgent, then people will go, yeah, I should do that at some stage.
Right.
And people will tend to attend to even the urgent, unimportant things beforehand. It's just a natural way that we're wired. So what we've got to do is create a degree of urgency, which some of what we've spoken about will do that. The other way that you can create urgency, though, is by pointing out the potential for problems, what the downside of delaying. If you do have a problem, if you do have, let's say you're doing a stress talk and you're talking about the potential impact of the nervous system being under stress with subluxation, and that could contribute to their stress, to turn that from just important to important and urgent, you've got to talk down what this can lead to over time, and giving examples for people of what they're around the corner that they're not seeing yet are the potential impacts. And so you've got to sort of use that understanding that people have a bias towards not taking action.
And just that's human nature. Like, if it isn't severe, I'll put it off till later. But if you can paint this idea and future pace them, and well, if these things aren't handled now, this is what it could lead to. And now that's really going to cost you time, and that's really going to be an inconvenience, or maybe something more. But it's a reality conversation that creates emotion. Yeah. And so that's where you can then use the logic, is show them in a future pace logically what happens if we don't. So it creates the emotional urgency now. So listen, if this sounds like there's a lot going on here, you'd be right, there is. This is why Martin and I teach a workshop together called Speak to Attract Believers. When I'm in Australia, I time up my dates so he can do it, and I won't teach it if he's not around, just because I love the synergy that we have. But also from the standpoint of compliance or regulatory bodies, making sure you're doing it the right way for this particular country, which is slightly different than what we teach in the US, but still applying all of these universal rules, all of these global communication premises that are built into it. And then the little tweaks and the genius is what Martin really kind of adds to make the Australian docs have full 100% confidence to go out and do this. But the truth is, we could each teach this topic and go for 2 days on our own. The coming together really makes us have the best part of our material to jive, and that benefits you. So if you join us for the Speak to Attract Believers, you get that online immediately, which means you have access to an online masterclass the day you decide you want it. And then once a year, we teach this together in Australia. I do it once a year in the US and then once a year in Europe. And so these concepts, you can then really flesh them out, understand what it is that you need to do in your talk specifically. And then even a step further than that is we crunch time and we teach you how to do 10-minute talks with all of this in like a hyper time chamber of just really short and efficient. So needless to say, if you want to get to the Speak to Attract Believers workshop, we used to call it the Art of the Close, but there's way more to it than just the close.
Yeah.
Because we're going further upstream. So anything else we should have added or mentioned?
No, I think you covered it all.
Super good. Communication genius. Look, when we teach together, I take notes. I think the great ones, that's what you do. And even though we're co-teaching as faculty, I'm taking notes on what Martin's saying, and these shared ideas are going to benefit you in your practice. So join us if this sounds good, and I know we can put some new patients in your practice, because first and foremost, if you take action this year, you'd be an early adopter. If you wait 2 or 3 years down the track, there's going to be medical doctors and nurses and weight loss experts and everybody else that was kind of doing this pre-pandemic. They're going to start showing up again, and you're going to have a lot of noise and competition in the space. So if you do take action and get on this now, then you'll have the new patients filling up your practice. You won't be one of many speakers. You'll be the only speaker for that particular audience. So I'm excited, and we'll get you in the classroom, teach you what we can't teach you online. We'll do the Q&A. And we are effectively your faculty. It's going to be an awesome, awesome opportunity to learn to speak to many, so you don't have to go one-on-one with spinal screenings forever. You can enjoy nice days like this. So let's get you back in the practice, get you adjusting. I'm going first.